have spoken in this election. Donald Trump and my Senate Republican colleagues in this room today know that the American people don't want the ACA overturned. Donald Trump and my Senate Republican colleagues know that the majority of Americans actually don't want Roe v. Wade overturned, that the majority of Americans don't want to see abortion criminalized in our states. But that is exactly why we are here today, because Donald Trump and Senate Republicans know that the American people don't want this, so they have to act now. They don't trust the American people, which is so painful because that's what they said. They said we should trust the American people, and what the American people say under President Obama 269 days from an election. And then, after that election, they tried time and time again to overturn the Affordable Care Act, but a handful of Republicans stopped them. You see, they tried in the Senate, they tried in the House, over 70 attempts to rip down the Affordable Care Act, but now Donald Trump has said explicitly he's going to do it through the courts by making the nomination we see here today. That's why we are here. The American people should know that that is what this is all about, rushing this nomination through to sit a Supreme Court justice in time to hear a case before the Supreme Court that will end the Affordable Care Act. We're here because in the middle of a deadly pandemic, in the middle of an ongoing election, Senate Republicans have found a nominee in Judge Barrett who they know will do what they couldn't do, subvert the will of the American people and overturn the ACA and overturn Roe v. Wade. That's what this is about. That's why we're here. It's very simple. Senate Republicans know the American people don't want this, but they don't care because they have only one small window of opportunity to work the system, betray what the American people want. And so they're desperately rushing to complete this process before America starts voting, but they don't have to do this. If one of my colleagues will stand up on this committee, we can hold this over until after an election. If two of my colleagues on the Senate floor agree with their other two colleagues, Republicans, we can stop this. Otherwise, this is a charade when they say this is a normal Judiciary Committee hearing for a Supreme Court nomination. There's nothing about this that's normal. It's not normal that Senate Republicans are rushing through a confirmation hearing, violating their own words, their own statements, betraying the trust of the American people and their colleagues, and failing to take in this hearing even the most basic safety protections to protect people around them, all to ensure that tens of millions of people will lose their health care when we're 7 months into one of the worst public health crises in the history of our country. It's not normal. This is not normal that millions of Americans like Michelle and Merritt are just scared of a deadly virus. They're scared of their fellow Americans who are sitting in this room right now. They're scared that their government and their institutions will be manipulated by people who could not work through the democratic process to take away their health care and are trying an end run to achieve that. Nothing about this today is normal. This is not normal. What is going on in America today, in the midst of a deadly pandemic and an ongoing election, having a rushed Supreme Court nomination hearing is not normal, and we cannot normalize it. People are voting right now. The American people should decide. The American people should decide. The American people should decide. I will not be voting to confirm Judge Barrett's nomination.
Thank you. Senator Crapo.
I would like to submit a letter for the record, if I may. We should not be rushing, as I said, this process. My colleagues agree with me that we should be working to protect the health and safety of Americans across the country and taking the precautions, greater precautions in this workplace. I'd like to enter into the record a letter from Senators Leahy, Senator Harris, and myself that we sent to the chairman last week asking that these hearings not proceed without proper testing measures, without all of us being tested and a COVID safety protocol being put into place.
Thank you. Without objection. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Judge Barrett, welcome and congratulations on the high honor of your nomination. I have some prepared remarks here, which I will give. But having sat through the speeches that I've heard already and listened to the attacks that have been made, both on Republican members of the committee and on you, I think it's important to just set the record straight on a few items before I then talk about why we are here, and that is you and your qualifications to serve as a justice. So what were the attacks? I'd say the first one is that we're rushing too fast and that we are violating the rules and norms and precedents of the Senate and speeding into these proceedings. What are the facts? Well, I had my staff check while we were sitting here. This hearing is 16 days after Judge Barrett's announced nomination. More than half of all Supreme Court hearings have been held within 16 days of the announcement of the nominee. This case is no different. A couple of examples. Justice Stevens, 10 days. Justice Rehnquist, 13 days. Justice Powell, 13 days. Justice Blackburn, 15 days. Justice Berger, 13 days. These proceedings are following right along in the same kind of process that has historically been the process of the Senate. So then the argument is made that, well, this is an election year, and the Republicans said back in 2016 that in an election year they wouldn't move forward with then President Obama's nomination. What are the facts? A vacancy has arisen in a presidential election year 29 times. Every single one, and this is important to note, every single one of those 29 times, whoever was the sitting president made a nomination to replace the vacancy, to fill the vacancy. Every one of those 29 times. 19 of those 29 times, the parties of the president and the Senate majority were the same. And 17 of those 19 nominees were confirmed. By contrast, of the 10 times in which the Senate was controlled by the party opposite to the president, only one time did the Senate that was not of the party of the president proceed to fill that vacancy. In fact, vacancies under a divided government, meaning a Senate and a presidency from different parties, have not been filled for over 130 years, going back to 1888. So much like when the Senate exercised its constitutional right, fully consistent with precedent in 2016, not to fill the vacancy when there was divided government, the Senate is today exercising its duty to move forward with processing this nomination, just like the vast majority of Senates in the past have done every time this has happened. And it's important to note that. Any claim that this process is unusual or that it violates the clear precedent of the Senate is simply false. So then, back to the attacks on the members of this committee on the Republican side, and frankly against the president, it says that we're trying to engage in court packing. Now, that's a novel one because it's actually the Senate following standard procedure with regard to a vacancy that is now being accused of being court packing, when my colleagues on the other side are actually proposing court packing. That is, to statutorily and with the signature of a president, change the law so that they can add more members to the court. FDR tried this, and his effort was rejected. That effort should be rejected now, but let's be clear about it. This is not court packing. That, threatening to pass a law and change the court, is court packing. So then what were the arguments that were actually leveled against Judge Barrett? Well, the standard arguments. She is going to overturn all protections for women. She is going to change all of the laws in the country that protect people's health care. And everyone in this country who has a pre-existing condition or has any kind of a worry about getting support needs to worry that she's going to be an activist judge and a justice and go in there and change the law. She's not, and we all know that. This is simply the tired, worn-out argument that is constantly made every time a Republican president nominates a candidate for the bench for the Supreme Court of the United States. And it's never been true, and it will not be true with Judge Barrett. So then the attack is, well, the Republicans don't care about people's health. They won't even try to get COVID relief out. And we're here in a hearing in the Judiciary Committee when we ought to be passing COVID relief legislation. And I've heard several of my colleagues basically say the Republicans are refusing to work on helping to address the COVID crisis. This coming from colleagues who just a month or so ago voted unanimously to filibuster a $500 to $600 billion COVID relief package in the Senate. A COVID relief package, I asked my staff to get me a quick summary of it, that put, as I indicated, somewhere between $500 and $600 billion into more small business loans, unemployment insurance, agriculture and farming assistance, postal service assistance, education assistance, both at the higher education levels and at K through 12, healthcare assistance for pandemic preparation, for strategic stockpiles, for testing, for contact tracing, billions for vaccine and therapeutic and diagnostic development, and the list goes on. We were stopped from proceeding with this legislation by a filibuster of those who now accuse us of not wanting to try to do something. We stand ready if you'll simply let us go to the legislation and pass it. So now, Judge Barrett, let me talk about you. Judge, you have an exemplary academic record and legal credentials, and you are preeminently qualified to serve on our Supreme Court. Following your graduation from law school, you clerked for both the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia and the U.S. Supreme Court. At the Supreme Court, you clerked, as everyone knows, for none other than the late Justice Antonin Scalia. Upon receiving your nomination to the Supreme Court, Judge Barrett reflected on her clerkship for Justice Scalia, citing his incalculable influence on her life. She also stated that his judicial philosophy is hers too, and that a judge must apply the law as written. That's what we need in our next Supreme Court justice. Rather than the activist justice that you are being accused of being. Judges are not policymakers, and they must be resolute in setting aside policy views that they may hold. And I know you know that. Should we not take Judge Barrett at her word? As a judge, Supreme Court or otherwise, she must be dedicated to interpreting the law as written with an unparalleled commitment to our Constitution. I've visited with her privately. I've reviewed her record. I have seen nothing that would indicate that she is not telling the truth when she says that is her view of how a judge should conduct herself. I've met with a number of Supreme Court nominees in my service in the Senate, and throughout I've continued to maintain an emphasis on following the law and upholding our Constitution, and that must be a central characteristic of the justices we select for this highly influential part of our government. Judges have a great responsibility to carefully exercise their authority within the limits of the law. Our court system has the responsibility to preserve our constitutional rights, ensure a limited government, and provide speedy and fair justice. Following her clerkships, Judge Barrett spent time in private practice before beginning her tenure as a professor. Her academic scholarship and lengthy analysis of issues facing the federal courts make her uniquely well qualified to serve on our nation's highest court. In particular, Judge Barrett's thoughtful exploration of the precedent and the doctrine of stare decisis demonstrates that she is both intellectual and deliberative in her understanding of the law. Moreover, it's evident that she understands the role of a fair and proper judge. In September 2017, Judge Amy Coney Barrett came before the Senate Judiciary Committee, this committee, after being nominated to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. During that hearing, she repeatedly expressed her commitment to independent and unbiased decision-making. I was proud to support her confirmation to the Court of Appeals in both the committee and on the Senate floor. Judge Barrett's remarkable resume shows she is a pioneer in the legal field. She will be the 5th woman and the first mother of school-age children to serve on the Supreme Court. In many ways, she's the ideal candidate to fill this current vacancy. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing more from the nominee about her experience and her judicial philosophy. The next few days will prove invaluable as we discuss with Judge Barrett at length the proper role of a judge in our legal system. I look forward to this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I believe Senator Harris.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hello?
We hear you.
Chairman, this hearing has brought together more than 50 people
Just,
to sit inside a room for hours, a
Senator-
closed door. Yes,
just wait just 1 second. We don't see you.
of course. You don't see me.
One, congratulations on being on the ticket. I hadn't told you that. There we go. All right.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you now, hear you loud and clear. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, can you see me and hear me?
I see you, I hear you. The floor is yours.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This hearing has brought together more than 50 people to sit inside of a closed-door room for hours while our nation is facing a deadly airborne virus. This committee has ignored common sense requests to keep people safe, including not requiring testing for all members, despite a coronavirus outbreak among senators of this very committee. By contrast, in response to this recent Senate outbreak, the leaders of Senate Republicans rightly postponed business on the Senate floor this week to protect the health and safety of senators and staff. Mr. Chairman, for the same reasons, this hearing should have been postponed. The decision to hold this hearing now is reckless and places facilities workers, janitorial staff, and congressional aides and Capitol Police at risk. Not to mention that while tens of millions of Americans are struggling to pay their bills, the Senate should be prioritizing coronavirus relief and providing financial support to those families. The American people need to have help to make rent or their mortgage payment. We should provide financial assistance to those who have lost their job and help parents put food on the table. Small businesses need help, as do the cities, towns, and hospitals that this crisis has pushed to the brink. The House bill would help families and small businesses get through this crisis. But Senate Republicans have not lifted a finger for 150 days, which is how long that bill has been here in the Senate, to move the bill. Yet, this committee is determined to rush a Supreme Court confirmation hearing through in just 16 days. Senate Republicans have made it crystal clear that rushing a Supreme Court nomination is more important than helping and supporting the American people who are suffering from a deadly pandemic and a devastating economic crisis. Their priorities are not the American people's priorities. But for the moment, Senate Republicans hold the majority in the Senate and determine the schedule. So here we are. The Constitution of the United States entrusts the Senate with the solemn duty to carefully consider nominations for lifetime appointments to the United States Supreme Court. Yet the Senate majority is rushing this process and jamming President Trump's nominee through the Senate while people are actually voting, just 22 days before the end of the election. More than 9 million Americans have already voted, and millions more will vote while this illegitimate committee process is underway. A clear majority of Americans want whomever wins this election to fill this seat, and my Republican colleagues know that. Yet, they are deliberately defying the will of the people in their attempt to roll back the rights and protections provided under the Affordable Care Act. And let's remember, in 2017, President Trump and congressional Republicans repeatedly tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. But remember, people from all walks of life spoke out and demanded Republicans stop trying to take away the American people's health care. Republicans finally realized that the Affordable Care Act is too popular to repeal in Congress. So now they are trying to bypass the will of the voters and have the Supreme Court do their dirty work. That's why President Trump promised to only nominate judges who will get rid of the Affordable Care Act. This administration, with the support of Senate Republicans, will be in front of the Supreme Court on November 10th to argue that the entire Affordable Care Act should be struck down. That's in 29 days that that'll happen. And that's a big reason why Senate Republicans are rushing this process. They are trying to get a justice onto the court in time to ensure they can strip away the protections of the Affordable Care Act. And if they succeed, it will result in millions of people losing access to health care at the worst possible time, in the middle of a pandemic. 23 million Americans could lose their health insurance altogether. If they succeed, they will eliminate protections for 135 million Americans with pre-existing conditions like diabetes and asthma, heart disease, or cancer, a list that now will include over 7 million Americans who have contracted COVID-19. Insurance companies could deny you coverage or could sell you a plan that won't pay a dime toward treating anything related to your pre-existing condition. If the Affordable Care Act is struck down, you will have to once again pay for things like mammograms and cancer screenings and birth control. Seniors will pay more for prescription drugs, and young adults will be kicked off of their parents' plans. And these are not abstract issues. We need to be clear about how overturning the Affordable Care Act will impact the people we all represent. For example, Micah, who is 11 years old, and she lives in Southern California. So Micah enjoys being a Girl Scout, and ice skating, and reading, and eating pasta, and baking. Her mother says the only reason Micah is able to live her life as she does now is because the Affordable Care Act guarantees that her health insurance cannot deny her coverage or limit her care because it's too expensive. You see, Micah has a congenital heart defect. She goes to multiple specialists throughout the year and gets an MRI with anesthesia every 6 months. At just 11 months old, Micah's family had already hit $50,000 in medical expenses, and her biannual MRI cost were $15,000 a session. And so, correction, by 11 months old, her family had hit $500,000 in medical expenses. If Republicans succeed in striking down the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies will be able to deny coverage for children with serious conditions, children like Micah. And parents, well, they'll be on their own. No one should face financial ruin to get their child or their spouse or their parent the care they need. And no family should be kept from seeing a doctor or getting treatment because an insurance company says that the treatment is too expensive. In America, access to health care should not be determined based on how much money you have. Health care and access to health care should be a right. Micah and millions of others who are protected by the Affordable Care Act know this is fundamentally what is at stake with this Supreme Court nomination. And of course, there's more at stake. Throughout our history, Americans have brought cases to the United States Supreme Court in our ongoing fight for civil rights, human rights, and equal justice. Decisions like Brown versus Board of Education, which opened up educational opportunities for Black boys and girls. Roe versus Wade, which recognized a woman's right to control her own body. Loving v. Virginia, and Obergefell v. Hodges, which recognized that love is love, and that marriage equality is the law of the land. The United States Supreme Court is often the last refuge for equal justice when our constitutional rights are being violated. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg devoted her life to fight for equal justice, and she defended the Constitution. She advocated for human rights and equality. She stood up for the rights of women. She protected workers. She fought for the rights of consumers against big corporations. She supported LGBTQ rights, and she did so much more. But now, her legacy and the rights she fought so hard to protect are in jeopardy. By replacing Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg with someone who will undo her legacy, President Trump is attempting to roll back Americans' rights for decades to come. Every American must understand that with this nomination, equal justice under law is at stake. Our voting rights are at stake. Workers' rights are at stake. Consumer rights are at stake. The right to a safe and legal abortion is at stake. And holding corporations accountable is at stake. And again, there's so much more. So, Mr. Chairman, I do believe this hearing is a clear attempt to jam through a Supreme Court nominee who will take health care away from millions of people during a deadly pandemic that has already killed more than 214,000 Americans. I believe we must listen to our constituents and protect their access to health care and wait to confirm a new Supreme Court justice until after Americans decide who they want in the White House. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Harris. Senator Kennedy.
You have a beautiful family, Judge. We claim you in Louisiana. We're proud of the fact in Louisiana that you were born in Metairie, a suburb of New Orleans. We're proud of the fact that you got a solid education at St. Mary's Dominican High School. Come back and visit us. I know your mom and dad still live there, and we're very proud of you and your career. This is a solemn occasion, as it should be. I can't think of another position, at least not a position that is for life, not a position in which the occupant is not elected by the people, that is more powerful, at least not in the Western world, than an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. And this process is not supposed to be the Big Rock Candy Mountain. Our job is to advise and consent. And that's one way of saying that we're supposed to make sure that the president hasn't, whatever president makes the nomination, hasn't made a mistake. And we all, as you can see, take that job seriously, as you can see, and we know you respect that. That's why I think over the next several days, it's appropriate for us to talk about your intellect, which is obvious, by the way, and your temperament, your character, and your judicial philosophy. And I hope we can talk about something else. And that's the role of the federal judiciary in American life. Now, look, Judge, I'm not naive. I understand this thing can turn sour real fast. We all watched the hearings for Justice Kavanaugh. It was a freak show. It looked like the cantina bar scene out of Star Wars. And I know, for someone unaccustomed to it, that it hurts to be called a racist. I think it's one of the worst things you can call an American. I know that it hurts to be called a white colonialist. And I know it must hurt for someone of deep Christian faith like yourself to be called a religious bigot, and to have it implied that because you are a devout Christian, that you're somehow unfit for public service. Before it's over with, they may call you Rosemary's Baby, for all I know. I hope not. And I know, as we've seen this morning, I know you think it's unfair. It is unfair for my colleagues to suggest, some overtly, some more indirectly, that if you're put on the United States Supreme Court, you will be on a mission from God to deny health care coverage for pre-existing conditions for every American. I know that seems preposterous to you, and it seems that way because it is. Take comfort in the fact that the American people, some of my colleagues disagree with this statement. They believe in government. I believe in people. The American people are not morons. They can see drivel when they see it, and they can appreciate it when they see it for being what it is. Now, let me turn to what I hope quickly we can talk about today. Americans love democracy. We'll even fight for it, and we have. And that's a wonderful thing. It's an important thing in today's world as this world becomes more authoritarian. And our founders, but we don't have a pure democracy. As a columnist I read this morning said, when we have to decide a complex issue dealing with social norms or economic issues, we don't all put on a toga and go down to the forum and vote. We have elected representatives. Those are members of Congress. And it is our elected representatives' job to decide social and economic policy. And if we don't like what they do, they're accountable. We vote them out. But in the last 50 years, certainly in the last 25, the United States Congress, either voluntarily or involuntarily, has ceded a lot of its power to the executive branch and to the federal judiciary. When I say the executive branch, I'm not necessarily talking about the president. I'm talking about the administrative state, the bureaucracy, as some call it. It's this giant rogue beast that enjoys power now that only kings once enjoyed. Members of the administrative state write their own laws. They interpret their own laws. They litigate their own laws in their own courts before judges that they appoint. And Congress has allowed that to happen. I think Congress has also abdicated a lot of power to the federal judiciary. I do. And I'm not saying that federal judges don't make law. Of course they make law. They make law in the context of a specific case. It's called judicial precedent. But our founders intended federal judges to exercise judicial restraint and to understand the special role, scope, and mission of the federal judiciary vis-a-vis the United States Congress. I don't think our founders intended judges to be politicians in robes. I think our founders intended judges, federal judges, to tell us what the law is, not what the law ought to be. I think our founders intended, as the Chief Justice put it, I think our founders intended federal judges to call balls and strikes. I don't think our founders intended for federal judges to be able to redraw the strike zone. I don't think our founders intended for judges to be politicians in robes. Politicians, you don't want the United States Supreme Court to turn into this. Trust me. Politicians get to vote their preferences under our democracy. Judges do not. Judges do not. And finally, unlike some of my colleagues, I don't think our founders intended the United States Supreme Court to become a mini Congress. I don't think our founders intended members of the United States Supreme Court to try to rewrite our statutes or the United States Constitution every other Thursday because to prosecute a social or an economic agenda that they can't get by the voters. And that goes on in America every day. We've reached the point where one single solitary federal judge in a limited venue can enjoin a federal statute or an executive order of the President of the United States for the entire country. And our founders never intended that. I want to close with two very short quotations. The first, stated much more eloquently than I can, is Justice Curtis in 1857. You probably read it. He was dissenting in the Dred Scott case. This is what Judge Curtis said. When a strict interpretation of the Constitution, according to the fixed rules which govern the interpretation of laws, is abandoned, and the theoretical opinions of individuals are allowed to control its meaning, we have no longer a Constitution. We're under the government of individual men who, for the time being, have power to declare what their Constitution is according to their own views of what it ought to mean. And finally, a more contemporary statement from a gentleman that you're very familiar with, Justice Scalia. He said it in real world terms. This is what he said. The American people love democracy, and the American people are not fools. The American people know their value judgments are quite as good as those taught in any law school, maybe better. Value judgments, after all, should be voted on, not dictated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Barrett, congratulations to you and to your family. I'm delighted to see that they are back in the room, and I'm thrilled that they are here with us today. You know, we have had 164 American citizens come before this committee for nomination to the Supreme Court, and today is the 5th time that we have had a female judge come before us, so we welcome you. And I will say this, unfortunately, it's neither rare nor remarkable to see the kind of performances my Democratic colleagues have put on today. What they're trying to do is to convince the American people that they should be terrified of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. If you listen closely to their full statements, it betrays their true intent. If you go back through the transcript, you're going to find not a coherent legal counterargument, but a panicked stump speech on behalf of their controversial platform. Rather than reviewing your judicial philosophies, they're instead choosing to project their own desires and their fears onto the American people. It sounds as if they are trying to create a panic. They decided to drum up indignation over the fact that you dared to present a counter-argument against the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. Apparently, a difference of opinion between two brilliant jurists who often disagree is just too much for them. The rhetoric is unsettling, but after listening to them, I worry more about its underpinnings because my colleagues' remarks have displayed their troubling belief that nothing but an activist judiciary will do for them. Given your track record, you'd think that my colleagues would jump at the opportunity to support a successful female legal superstar who is highly regarded by both her Democratic and Republican colleagues and who is a working mom. But as today's increasingly paternalistic and frankly disrespectful arguments have shown, if they had their way, only certain kinds of women would be allowed into this hearing room. On that note, not so long ago, in another hearing, they scrutinized your commitment to your Catholic faith and tried to use that as a way to question your competency and your professionalism. They know that that is unconstitutional. The Constitution forbids it. You are a brilliant jurist and a constitutional law expert. You will be an intellectual powerhouse on the Supreme Court, and you will steer the panel's focus toward textualism and originalism as rightful guiding philosophies. I love Justice Scalia's definition of textualism. Textualism in its present form begins and ends with what the text says and fairly implies. He goes on to defend textualism and explains that this method can lead to both conservative and liberal outcomes. Similarly, originalism doesn't always lead a jurist down the path they'd most like to follow. This method of interpretation holds that the meaning of a legal document, such as the Constitution, remains fixed, even when applied over time to new questions. Staying true to these guidelines requires more study and patience than other methods that allow judges to reinvent the law or be activists when things get tricky. Since taking the bench, I appreciate that you have written over 100 opinions and have participated in over 900 appeals where you have applied this complex reasoning. Thank you for that. We know that you are a prolific scholar and author of over a dozen articles on the courts and the Constitution. The ABA has rated you as well qualified to serve as a Supreme Court justice. I appreciate that many times you've probably done this with the child in your arms, on your hip, or somewhere in tow, maybe waiting for a ball game to begin. You have done all of this as you have been a friend, a mentor, a wife, and a mom. These are impressive qualifications by any standard. So it is no surprise that you are fielding attacks from other angles. Many of my colleagues have wasted a lot of their time complaining that the process, in an effort to delay and obstruct a legitimate, constitutionally sound confirmation hearing. Let's not forget, it was the Democrats who took an axe to process in 2018 when they dropped last-minute, unsubstantiated sexual assault allegations against Justice Kavanaugh. We still don't have the full story about their level and manner of coordination with activists and mainstream media outlets, but what we do know is that they turned that confirmation into a circus. And on that note, it is hard to take seriously their complaints about moving too quickly. We've heard about the timeline for Justice O'Connor, 33 days, Justice Ginsburg, 43 days. And just a word on Justice Ginsburg, whose seat we are filling. She was indeed a role model for many because she fought to open more doors for women in the law and beyond, and I sincerely hope that I am as effective an advocate in the Senate as she was on the court. We know from studying American history that women have had to always fight for a seat at the table. This goes back to Abigail Adams, who urged her husband, John, to please remember the ladies in their fight for independence. And we know it took 150 years for women to get that right to vote, but the Constitution allowed for that amendment process. Unfortunately, what we see today is that radical activists would like nothing more than to take a hatchet to process. Their favorite play is confronting the American people with the supposed illegitimacy of the Constitution. They argue that our founders' flaws, and yes, they were flawed. All humans are. That the flaws invalidate the principles that bind this country together. This betrays a dangerously naive understanding of the point and purpose of our founding legal document. The timeless principles contained in that document were written to protect individual rights, absolutely. These principles, of course, include the separation of powers and federalism in our government, a system of checks and balances that prevents encroachment by one branch or another. If Congress acts beyond the scope of its legislative authority or the president grows too power hungry, the judiciary has the authority to rein that branch back in. And if the vast bureaucracy dares to overregulate, states and their citizens have the right to stand up and challenge that overreach as being beyond the scope of federal power. Together, the separation of powers and federalism have protected our republic from falling into the hands of tyrants. But keep in mind that the founders despised the tyranny of British rule just as much as they despised the whims of the mob. Flash forward to today, when American exceptionalism is under bitter attack from yet another mob. While most Americans take pride in our heritage, a vocal minority finds fault at every turn. They demand to know, can we still call the Constitution a relevant, valid source of law, even if no women or people of color participated in the drafting? Are the principles in that document still capable of curbing abuses of power and safeguarding freedom? Can we have faith that the future of democracy remains strong despite a summer of looting and violence in the streets? The answer to each is yes. And over the next few days, I expect that you, Judge Barrett, will explain why. So many families are watching today, and we're all going to be listening. Thank you for appearing before us. We look forward to your answers.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn. I have two letters I'd like to submit for the record. One from the architect of the Capitol, showing that the room is CDC compliant. We'll introduce that. And we do have the ABA rating regarding Judge Barrett. I'll introduce it in the record, but it's fairly short, so I'll just read it if that's okay. The American Bar Association Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary has completed its evaluation of the professional qualifications of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who has been nominated by the President to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. As you know, the Standing Committee confines its evaluation to the qualities of integrity, professional competence, and judicial temperament. A substantial majority of the Standing Committee determined that Judge Barrett is well qualified, and a minority is of the opinion that she is qualified to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. The majority rating represents the Standing Committee's official rating. Enter that into the record. Now we have a...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could you explain what CDC compliant means?
Means that the room is set up, social distancing regarding the virus, that the architect of the Capitol measured the space. And as to me, I was tested a week ago Friday, had brief contact with Senator Lee. I was negative. I've been told by Senator Moynihan and a physician in South Carolina, there's no requirement to test me. I feel fine. My exposure is not such that I should be quarantined or tested. Anybody that wants to get tested, they can. And I made a decision to try to make the room as safe as possible, but to come to work. Well, millions of Americans are going to work today. Somebody may have tested positive in a restaurant, a military unit, fire department, or police department. You make it as safe as possible, you manage the risk, and you go to work. I'm not going to be told to be tested by political opponents. I'm going to be tested as an individual when the CDC requires it. I think we can safely conduct this hearing. We have, and I think it's off to a good start. So I do care about everybody's safety. But as a lot of Americans out there, we have to go to work, and you can't demand not to show up to work unless everybody you may come in contact with is tested whether they need to or not, and we're not going to do that here. Now we have a panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, for that question. We have three people, our two colleagues from Indiana, Senator Todd Young and Senator Mike Braun. I know Louisiana adopts our judge here, but she is living now in Indiana. And the third is Professor Patricia O'Hara, who I'd like to briefly introduce. Professor O'Hara is Professor Emerita, I hope I got that right, of law at Notre Dame Law School. She has served on the faculty for 40 years. She first arrived in Notre Dame in 1971 as a first-year law student. She graduated summa cum laude and first in her class in 1974. Described as the heart and soul of Notre Dame for over 40 years by current Notre Dame Law Dean G. Marcus Cole, Professor O'Hara's career at Notre Dame was that of a trailblazer. She was the first woman to graduate first in her class from Notre Dame, the first woman appointed by the Board of Trustees to serve as an officer of the university as Vice President for Student Affairs, and the first woman to serve as Dean of the Law School. So with that, we'll start with Senator Todd. I think all these individuals are remote. Senator Todd? Todd Young?
Well, thank you, Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of the committee. Today, I join you in the shadow of Monument Circle in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am honored to appear before you to introduce Judge Amy Coney Barrett, a remarkable Hoosier poised to make her mark on our country. She truly is an American original. In 2017, when there was an opening on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, my office began looking for an extraordinary American who would uphold the rule of law. In response, we received dozens of applications from many of the finest legal minds in the state of Indiana. My staff and I began researching in earnest to learn everything we could about each candidate to determine who among them would make the best judge. And I interviewed the best of the best. One of those was a constitutional law professor from the University of Notre Dame by the name of Amy Coney Barrett. I first met with then Professor Barrett in the spring of 2017, and it was abundantly clear that she was a star. A brilliant legal scholar, she was and is held in the highest regard by her peers in the legal world. Her integrity and character are unimpeachable. She's a model of collegiality and fairness. And simply, she possessed all of the necessary qualities to be a great appellate court judge then and to be a great Supreme Court justice now. My colleague, former Senator Joe Donnelly, and I approved of her nomination, and a hearing was set. Unfortunately, some resorted to attacks on Judge Barrett's religious convictions. I can tell you that in Indiana and much of the country, faith is viewed as an asset in a public servant, not a liability. As Notre Dame President Father Jenkins reminded us then, being a person of faith doesn't interfere with one's ability to apply the law. Thankfully, Judge Barrett's qualifications outshone personal attacks, and she was confirmed by a bipartisan majority to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. As a member of that court, Judge Barrett's proven that she is a rather brilliant jurist who interprets the Constitution as written and carefully weighs the facts of a given case. She's heard more than 600 cases on the Seventh Circuit and authored nearly 100 opinions. And I should note, she is the first woman from Indiana ever to serve on that esteemed court. During that Seventh Circuit interview back in 2017, it was obvious that Judge Barrett loved the law and the Constitution. Her love for her family, her husband Jesse, and their 7 children was also clear. If confirmed, Judge Barrett will be the 5th woman and the first mother of school-aged children to serve as a Supreme Court justice. Now, being a parent doesn't qualify one to sit on the Supreme Court, but it does give us Hoosiers yet another reason to be proud of Amy Coney Barrett and the trail she's blazed leading her to this moment. Education, faith, family, community, equal justice under the law. These are all values that Midwesterners hold dear. Indeed, they are values that Americans hold dear, and they are all values embodied by Judge Barrett. Author Kurt Vonnegut, another American original from Indiana, once said, "I don't know what it is about Hoosiers, but wherever you go, there's always a Hoosier doing something very important." Where Amy Coney Barrett has gone, she has always been doing something very important. From raising a family, to educating the next generation of scholars, to administering justice on the Court of Appeals. It's my hope that this body will confirm Judge Barrett in a bipartisan fashion, so that we will soon find another Hoosier doing something very important on the Supreme Court of the United States. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Young. Senator Braun, were we able to connect with him? We're having some technical problems. We're good? Senator Braun.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, we're good.
Mike,
Tell Jason.
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, floor is yours.
Chairman Graham?
Yeah.
Hey, Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Feinstein, it's an honor for me to join Senator Young and Professor Emerita O'Hara to introduce a fellow Hoosier who makes our state proud. I'm doing this from my hometown, Jasper, Indiana, at City Hall, literally, and we're on Main Street. And figuratively, from a place, town, state that represents a broad cross-section of our country. In 2013, Justice Antonin Scalia wrote that the federal judiciary is hardly a cross-section of America. Today, it's still easy to see what he meant. When confirmed, Amy Coney Barrett would become the only justice of the Supreme Court who spent the majority of her professional life in Middle America, not on the East Coast. When confirmed, she will be the only sitting justice who did not receive her law degree from Harvard or Yale. Yet her Notre Dame law credentials are also from a first-rate university. When confirmed, she will be only the second current justice to join the court from west of the nation's capital. When this vacancy arose, I was the first to voice my support for a nominee from the Midwest because I believe we need more judges who understand those Midwestern values that guide our lives: faith, family, community, and respect for the law. Amy Coney Barrett is that quintessential Midwesterner, hardworking, generous, humble. She's a top-flight law scholar who's just as comfortable at the Saturday morning tailgate as she is in the ivory tower, a legal titan who drives a minivan. I immediately supported Judge Barrett's nomination, not only because she is a highly qualified jurist, but because she's proven both on and off the bench that she has the decency and fundamental respect for our country and its Constitution to serve honorably. And now I'd like to say a word about faith. Much will certainly be made in the coming days of Judge Barrett's Catholic faith and how she practices it. It's a faith that I and many Americans share. Our founders anticipated this question, and as they so often do, got it right. Liberals and conservatives alike are bound by the Constitution's firm edict that no religious test should ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. I believe hostility toward Judge Barrett's religious beliefs today could set a dangerous precedent of hostility toward other religious beliefs tomorrow. Judge Barrett has been clear in her public life where she falls on the question of faith and the law. As she concluded in a 1998 essay, we're sure to hear cherry-picked over the next few weeks, judges cannot, nor should they try to, align our legal system with the church's moral teaching whenever the two diverge. Faith is very important to most Americans, and I agree that faith should be a key word in Judge Barrett's confirmation. But I believe the most important question of faith should be, is she willing to faithfully interpret the Constitution? Judge Barrett's record shows that she will. Throughout her nearly 100 written opinions on the appellate court, Judge Barrett has proven that she is a strong constitutional originalist who will not cut the American people out of their own government by treating the Supreme Court as a third chamber of Congress. On the bench, her qualifications are beyond question. Off the bench, she exemplifies the generosity and character Hoosiers are known for, and she has lived a life rooted in those heartland values I mentioned before: faith, family, community, and respect for the law. Hoosiers should be proud to have Amy Coney Barrett serving and representing our state currently, and I believe she will make all Americans proud as a justice of the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Professor O'Hara. Professor?
This will pop back up.
Is the professor with us? Professor, could you count to 10, please? Could you speak? If you can hear me. Professor O'Hara, if you can speak up. If you hear me, please speak up. Okay. I don't know, she must be in the 3G part of Indiana.
Photograph him so he because it doesn't.
Can see if we're in contact with her at all.
Oh, I see.
Is it working? Professor, could you speak up, please?
Suggest that she unmute her mic.
You need to unmute your mic, I've been told, Professor O'Hara. How does she do that?
She just tapped it. Unless you're sending code.
Put a quarter in it, I don't know. You're not going to give us a quarter, I know that. Can she hear us? Well, I'm afraid we have technical difficulties, and I guess what we'll do now, if you can fix them in the next 30 seconds, let me know. If not, Judge Barrett, we will hear from you. Any progress with Professor O'Hara? Okay, Judge, if you don't mind, you can take your mask off, please. Raise your right hand. Stand up, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Welcome to the committee, to your family. Y'all have done a great job over there. The floor is yours, Judge.
Chairman Graham. I'm not sure this is on. Ranking Member Feinstein and members of the committee, I'm honored and humbled to appear before you today as a nominee for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. I thank the President for entrusting me with this profound responsibility, as well as for the graciousness that he and the First Lady have shown my family throughout this process. I thank Senator Young for introducing me, as he did at my hearing, to serve on the Seventh Circuit. And I also thank Senator Braun for his support. And while she could not be with us via the satellite, I am also grateful to former Dean Patty O'Hara of the Notre Dame Law School. She hired me as a professor nearly 20 years ago, and she has been a mentor, colleague, and friend ever since. I thank the members of this committee and your other colleagues in the Senate who've taken the time to meet with me since my nomination. It's been a privilege to meet you. As I said when I was nominated to serve as a justice, I'm used to being in a group of 9, my family. Nothing is more important to me, and I'm very proud to have them behind me. My husband, Jesse, and I have been married for 21 years. He has been a selfless and wonderful partner every step of the way. I once asked my sister, "Why do you think marriage is hard? People are always saying that." "I think it's easy." And she looked at me and said, "Well, maybe you should ask Jesse if he agrees with that." I decided not to take her advice because I know that I am far luckier in love than I deserve. Jesse and I are parents to 7 wonderful children. Our oldest daughter, Emma, is a sophomore in college who just might follow her parents into a career in the law. Next is Vivian, who came to us from Haiti. When Vivian arrived, she was so weak that we were told she might never talk or walk normally, but now she deadlifts as much as the male athletes in our gym, and I assure you she has no trouble talking. Tess is 16, and while she shares her parents' love for the liberal arts, she also has a math gene that seems to have skipped her parents' generation. John Peter joined us shortly after the devastating earthquake in Haiti. And Jesse, who brought him home, still describes the shock on JP's face when he got off the plane in wintertime Chicago. Once that shock wore off, JP assumed the happy-go-lucky attitude that is still his signature trait. Liam is smart, strong, and kind, and to our delight, he still loves watching movies with Mom and Dad. 10-year-old Juliet is already pursuing her goal of becoming an author by writing multiple essays and short stories, one of which she recently submitted for publication. And our youngest, Benjamin, is at home with friends. Benjamin has Down syndrome, and he is the unanimous favorite of the family. He was watching the hearing this morning, I'm told, and he was calling out our names as he saw the kids in the back. My own siblings are here, some in the hearing room and some nearby. Carrie, Megan, Eileen, Amanda, Vivian, and Michael are my oldest and dearest friends. We've seen each other through both the happy and hard parts of life, and I am so grateful that they are with me now. My parents, Mike and Linda Coney, are watching from their New Orleans home. My father was a lawyer and my mother was a teacher, which explains why I became a law professor. More important, my parents modeled for me and my 6 siblings a life of service, principle, faith, and love. I remember preparing for a grade school spelling bee against a boy in my class, and to boost my confidence, my dad saying, "Anything boys can do, girls can do better." And at least as I remember it, I spelled my way to victory. I received similar encouragement from the devoted teachers at St. Mary's Dominican, my all-girls high school in New Orleans. When I went to college, it never occurred to me that anyone would consider girls less capable than boys. My freshman year, I took a literature class filled with upperclassmen English majors. And when I did my first presentation, which was on Breakfast at Tiffany's, I feared I had failed. But my professor took the time to talk to me. She filled me with confidence about how well I had done, and she became a mentor. And when I graduated with a degree in English, she gave me Truman Capote's collected works as a gift. Although I considered graduate studies in English, I decided that my passion for words was better suited to deciphering statutes than novels. I was fortunate to have wonderful legal mentors, in particular, the judges for whom I clerked. The legendary Judge Lawrence Silberman of the D.C. Circuit gave me my first job in the law, and he continues to teach me today. He was by my side during my Seventh Circuit hearing. He swore me in at my investiture, and he's cheering me on from his living room right now. I also clerked for Justice Scalia, and like many law students, I felt like I knew the justice before I ever met him, because I had read so many of his colorful, accessible opinions. More than the style of his writing, though, it was the content of Justice Scalia's reasoning that shaped me. His judicial philosophy was straightforward. A judge must apply the law as it is written, not as she wishes it were. Sometimes that approach meant reaching results that he did not like. But as he put it in one of his best-known opinions, that is what it means to say that we have a government of laws and not of men. Justice Scalia taught me more than just law. He was devoted to his family, resolute in his beliefs, and fearless of criticism. And as I embarked on my own legal career, I resolved to maintain that same perspective. There's a tendency in our profession to treat the practice of law as all-consuming while losing sight of everything else. But that makes for a shallow and unfulfilling life. I worked hard as a lawyer and as a professor. I owed that to my clients, to my students, and to myself. But I never let the law define my identity or crowd out the rest of my life. A similar principle applies to the role of courts. Courts have a vital responsibility to the rule of law, which is critical to a free society. But courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches, elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try. That is the approach that I have strived to follow as a judge on the Seventh Circuit. In every case, I have carefully considered the arguments presented by the parties, discussed the issues with my colleagues on the court, and done my utmost to reach the result required by the law, whatever my own preferences might be. I try to remain mindful that while my court decides thousands of cases a year, each case is the most important one to the litigants involved. After all, cases are not like statutes, which are often named for their authors. Cases are named for the parties who stand to gain or lose in the real world, often through their liberty or livelihood. When I write an opinion resolving a case, I read every word from the perspective of the losing party. I ask myself how I would view the decision if one of my children was the party that I was ruling against. Even though I would not like the result, would I understand that the decision was fairly reasoned and grounded in law? That is the standard that I set for myself in every case, and it is the standard that I will follow so long as I am a judge on any court. When the President offered me this nomination, I was deeply honored. But it was not a position I had sought out and I thought carefully before accepting. The confirmation process and the work of serving on the court, if confirmed, requires sacrifices, particularly from my family. I chose to accept the nomination because I believe deeply in the rule of law and the place of the Supreme Court in our nation. I believe Americans of all backgrounds deserve an independent Supreme Court that interprets our Constitution and laws as they are written. And I believe I can serve my country by playing that role. I come before this committee with humility about the responsibility that I have been asked to undertake, and with appreciation for those who have come before me. I was 9 years old when Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman to sit in this seat. She was a model of grace and dignity throughout her distinguished tenure on the court. When I was 21 years old and just beginning my career, Ruth Bader Ginsburg sat in this seat. She told the committee, "What has become of me could only happen in America." I have been nominated to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat, but no one will ever take her place. I will be forever grateful for the path she marked and the life she led. If confirmed, it would be the honor of a lifetime to serve alongside the Chief Justice and 7 Associate Justices. I admire them all and would consider each a valued colleague. And I might bring a few new perspectives to the bench. As the President noted when he announced my nomination, I would be the first mother of school-aged children to serve on the court. And I know that it would make Senators Young and Braun happy to know that I would be the first justice to join the court from the 7th Circuit in 45 years. I would be the only sitting justice who didn't attend school at Harvard or Yale, but I am confident that Notre Dame could hold its own, and maybe I could even teach them a thing or two about football. As a final note, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank the many Americans from all walks of life who have reached out with messages of support over the course of my nomination. I believe in the power of prayer, and it has been uplifting to hear that so many people are praying for me. I look forward to answering the committee's questions over the coming days. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, I pledge to faithfully and impartially discharge my duties to the American people as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Barrett. Let's try Professor O'Hara. Any luck with her?
I'm here, Chairman Graham.
Thank you. I apologize for the problem. The floor is yours.
That's very kind of you. It's anticlimactic because you've already heard from the most important person from whom you need to hear. But it's very kind of you to take the time. I have known Judge Amy Coney Barrett for just shy of 20 years, and I want to thank you, the ranking member, Senator Feinstein, the distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Young and Senator Braun, for the opportunity to speak about her here today. I first came to meet her when, as Dean of the Law School, together with my colleagues, we recruited her to the faculty in 2002. I was aware of her reputation as a law student, but I had not taught her. So I can well remember that in the initial interview, from my standpoint, I was not thinking of her so much as a Notre Dame alum, but rather as a candidate in whom many law schools would have an interest. After all, she was first in her class. She was executive editor of the Law Review. She had held 2 distinguished clerkships for demanding jurists, Judge Lawrence Silverman on the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and Justice Antonin Scalia, a short period in private practice then at Baker Botts, and an Olin Fellowship at George Washington University Law School. So from my standpoint as dean, in a market in which law schools compete aggressively for candidates with sterling credentials like hers, Amy Coney Barrett was a big hit and a big win for us. In the course of the next few years, I was responsible for creating an environment in which she could take her potential and reach the maturation that would be necessary to meet the demanding standards of excellence in scholarship and teaching for promotion to tenure. I want to assure you that it was the easiest task of my entire 10 years as dean. I watched her develop into an exceptional teacher and a superb scholar. Except that I must confess to say watching her develop is a bit of a misnomer because in many ways, Judge Barrett sprang full grown into the legal academy. The first of 3 distinguished teaching awards that she holds from our students was presented to her by only the 2nd class that she taught. And in my annual visits to observe her classroom teaching, it became clear to me why that was the case. Our students then and now hold her in awe for the power of her intellect and for her consummate professionalism. To read her student teaching evaluations is like reading a thesaurus that only has superlatives in it. Her classes are known for the clarity of the presentation of substantive legal material, but also for open-minded, non-directive discussion, question and answer, respectful of differences and of differences in learning style with our students. Our students strive to meet her high and demanding expectations because they just don't want to disappoint her. And they greatly appreciate her availability outside the classroom for mentoring and support. At the same time that she was developing and building relationships with our students, she also produced an incredible portfolio of scholarships, superb in both its depth and its quality. Scholars around the academy hold her work in the highest regard. And so when it did come time for her tenure case, I can only tell you, without breaching the confidentiality of that process, that it was as easy as a tenure case could possibly be. Her work appears in leading law reviews, University of Chicago, Columbia, Cornell, Virginia, and Texas, to name but a few. I was not surprised in later years when she was tapped for service on the Appellate Advisory Committee on the Federal Appellate Rules of Procedure and elected to the prestigious American Law Institute. And in her 3 years as a judge on the Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, her opinions have been characterized by the same qualities as her scholarship: intellectual rigor, painstaking analysis, clarity of legal reasoning and of writing, accompanied by her deep commitment as a jurist to apply the law to the facts of the case before her. Stellar as her professional accomplishments are, no introduction of Professor Barrett is complete without talking about her personal qualities. She is brilliant but humble, fair and impartial but empathetic, open-minded and respectful of differences, a skilled listener and able to build consensus, generous, especially to those in need. If I had to describe her in just a few words, I would tell you that Amy Coney Barrett is a woman who leads an integrated life of mind, heart, and soul. And it's that integration that allows her to move so seamlessly between her professional responsibilities and her family commitments. It humbles me now, as it did 12 years ago, that I was tasked at one point in my life with evaluating the professional qualifications of Judge Barrett in a university setting. Truth be told, she ran circles around me as a junior faculty member, and in the intervening years, she has left me completely in the dust. And nothing gives me more joy than to be able to say so, because this is the standard of excellence that we should demand for institutions of singular importance to us. I have only had 2 opportunities to communicate with this distinguished committee. The first was 10 years ago when I wrote a very strong letter of support for then nominee, now Justice Elena Kagan, whose tenure as Dean of Harvard Law School overlapped with my own tenure as Dean here. The second is today, in presenting Amy Coney Barrett to you and endorsing her in equally strong terms. There may be some who would find those 2 recommendations in juxtaposition, but I find them entirely consistent. Over the course of my 40 years in the legal academy, I've been blessed with the opportunity to meet many Supreme Court justices. As to the justices I've met, while their judicial philosophies may differ and their interpretive methodologies may differ, what they share is powerful intellects, rigorous work ethics, skilled listening skills, the ability to be open to persuasion and also to persuade themselves. To be fair and impartial, they are people of integrity, and they have a commitment to applying the law to the facts of the case before them. They understand that their role as justices is to advance the rule of law, not to advance personal policy preferences. They understand their solemn responsibility to preserve the court as an institution, not wings of the court, a single institution that plays a singular role in our republic. I know firsthand, from having worked closely with Judge Barrett for almost 20 years, that she possesses all these same qualifications in abundance. And I trust that over the course of the next few days, with the opportunity to engage in dialogue with her, that you will come to the same conclusion and recommend her for confirmation as an Associate Justice to the Supreme Court of the United States. Thank you so much for taking this late opportunity to have me say a few words about Professor Barrett.
Thank you very much, Professor O'Hara. Thank you, Judge Barrett, and to your family, congratulations and welcome. We're going to have a couple long days ahead. Questions for the record will be due this Friday at 8 o'clock, which is standard practice for the committee. We begin tomorrow 30-minute rounds, followed by 20-minute rounds. Just do the math. Got a couple long days ahead of us, so get some rest. We will be in recess until tomorrow at 9 o'clock. O'Hara. I hope people in the country listened to what she had to say. So this was a good day. You can tell there's political differences abound, but if you look at the qualifications of Judge Barrett, you have to come away impressed. I think she's every bit as qualified as Sotomayor and Kagan, Alito, Roberts, Kavanaugh, you name it. From a qualifications point of view, I think she is a slam dunk. Unfortunately, politics abounds now around judges. We'll see what happens in the next 2 days. But I'm proud of the committee. We have stern differences, but they were displayed respectfully, and I hope that continues for the next week.
Democrats have a sort of strategy going right now where they're talking about the ACA. They're showing people who have been affected. It seems like an effective measure for them on this hearing.
Well, it's pretty clear that they want to talk about the Affordable Health Care Act. In terms of policy, the judge will decide the merits based on the law. In my state, there's been a 30% increase in premiums of Obamacare, and we're down to one provider from 5. So we'll have a contest about whether or not Obamacare is a good deal or a bad deal for South Carolina. 35% of the money goes to 3 states at our expense, but her job will be to talk about the law and how you would apply the law to any litigation, whether it be guns, health care, abortion, campaign finance, and I think she'll do a good job understanding the role of a judge is different from that of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Judge Barrett's family, welcome. The hearing to confirm Judge Amy Barrett to the Supreme Court will now begin. I appreciate everyone's cooperation, and we will have a hearing, hopefully, that the country will learn more about Judge Barrett, learn more about the law, learn about the differences in judging and maybe the differences in the party. If that happens, it'll be a successful hearing. As to the hearing room, I doubt if there's any room in the country that's been given more attention and detail to make sure it's CDC compliant. The architect of the Capitol, working with the attending physician, has set up the room in a fashion that we can safely do our business. Senator Lee is back. You've been cleared by your physician. Welcome back. The COVID problem in America is real, it's serious, it's dangerous, and we have to mitigate the risk. I would just let every American know that many of you are going to work today, probably already been at work, and I hope your employer will take care of your health care needs. But we do have a country that needs to move forward safely, and there are millions of Americans, cops, waitresses, nurses, you name it, going to work today to do their job, and we're going to work in the Senate to do our job. And one of the most important jobs the Senate Judiciary Committee will ever do is have hearings and confirm a justice to the Supreme Court. So for housekeeping purposes, the first day has traditionally been opening statements by my colleagues. We'll do 10-minute rounds, and everybody will have 10 minutes to talk about their views of the hearing and what this is all about. Then we will have a panel to introduce Judge Barrett, and she will make an opening statement. We'll try to finish mid-afternoon if that's possible. Then Tuesday and Wednesday will be long days. There'll be 30-minute rounds for every senator, followed by a 20-minute round. My goal is to complete that Wednesday at some kind of reasonable hour in the evening. Thursday, we will begin the markup. I intend to hold it over and bring the committee back on the 22nd to vote on the nomination. So if I may, I'll start off with an opening statement and say, why are we here? Number one, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on September the 18th. What can you say about Justice Ginsburg? She was confirmed 96-3. Now, those were days that have since passed. I regret that. 96-3. Now, this was a person who worked for the ACLU, someone who was known in progressive circles as an icon. Apparently, just about every Republican voted for her. Her good friend on the court, Justice Scalia, I think got 97 votes. I don't know what happened between then and now. I guess we can all take some blame, but I just want to remind everybody there was a time in this country where someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was seen by almost everybody as qualified for the position of being on the Supreme Court, understanding that she would have a different philosophy than many of the Republicans who voted for her. 27 years on the court. Before becoming a member of the court, she was an active litigator, pushing for more equal justice and better rights for women throughout the country. Her close friend, until his death, Justice Scalia called her the leading and very successful litigator on behalf of women's rights, the Thurgood Marshall of that cause. What high praise. I can't say any more than that statement says. In my view, the person appearing before this committee is in a category of excellence, something the country should be proud of, and she will have a chance to make her case to be a worthy successor and to become the 9th member of the Supreme Court of the United States. On September the 26th, Judge Amy Barrett was nominated by President Trump to the Supreme Court. Who is she? She is a judge sitting on the 7th Judicial Circuit. She's highly respected. She was a professor at Notre Dame. 3 years during that tenure, she was chosen by the students to being the best professor, which I'm sure is no easy task at any college. She's widely admired for her integrity. She grew up in New Orleans, graduated from Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee in 1994, graduated summa cum laude and first in her class from Notre Dame Law School in 1997. So academically, she's very gifted. She clerked for Judge Lawrence Silberman on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and then for Justice Scalia on the Supreme Court. She practiced law in Washington, D.C. She joined the faculty at Notre Dame in 2002. She's published numerous articles in prestigious journals, including the Columbia, University of Virginia, and Cornell Law Review. She's been a circuit court judge at the Seventh Circuit since 2017. She was confirmed to that position with a bipartisan vote. She has heard hundreds of cases in that capacity. She said, "I clerked for Justice Scalia more than 20 years ago, but the lessons I learned still resonate. His judicial philosophy is mine. A judge must apply the law as written. Judges are not policymakers, and they must be resolute in setting aside any policy views they might hold." She will give her statement, but I think that is a good summary of who she is. That's who Amy Barrett is in terms of the law. In terms of Amy Barrett, the individual, she and her husband have 7 children, 2 adopted. So 9 seems to be a good number. The process. This is an election year. We're confirming the judge in an election year after the voting has occurred. What will happen is that my Democratic colleagues will say, this has never been done, and they're right in this regard. Nobody's, I think, has ever been confirmed in an election year past July. The bottom line is Justice Ginsburg, when asked about this several years ago, said that a president serves for 4 years, not 3. There's nothing unconstitutional about this process. This is a vacancy that's occurred through a tragic loss of a great woman, and we're going to fill that vacancy with another great woman. The bottom line here is that the Senate is doing its duty constitutionally. As to Judge Garland, the opening that occurred with the passing of Justice Scalia was in the early part of an election year. The primary process had just started. And we can talk about history, but here's the history as I understand it. There's never been a situation where you had a president of one party and the Senate of another, where the nominee, the replacement, was made in an election year. It's been over 140 years ago. I think there have been 19 vacancies filled in an election year. 17 of the 19 were confirmed to the court when the party of the president and the Senate were the same. In terms of timing, the hearing is starting 16 days after a nomination. More than half of all Supreme Court hearings have been held within 16 days of the announcement of the nominee. Stevens 10, Rehnquist 13, Powell 13, Blackman 15, Berger 13. All I can say is that I feel that we're doing this constitutionally, that our Democratic friends object to the process. I respect them all. They'll have a chance to have their say. But most importantly, I hope we will know more about how the law works, checks and balances, what the Supreme Court is all about when this hearing is over. Why hold this hearing? A lot of people on our side say just ram it through. I hear that a lot. That's why I don't listen to the radio much anymore. So the bottom line is I think it's important. This is a lifetime appointment. I would like the world and the country to know more about Judge Barrett. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I think you're a great choice by the president. This is probably not about persuading each other unless something really dramatic happens. All Republicans will vote yes and all Democrats will vote no. And that will be the way the breakout of the vote. But the hearing is a chance for Democrats to dig deep into her philosophy, appropriately ask her about the law, how she would be different, what's on her mind. It gives Republicans a chance to do the same thing. Most importantly, it gives you a chance, the American people, to find out about Judge Barrett. Judge for yourself. is this person qualified? Is she as qualified as Sotomayor and Kagan? I think so. These were two nominees presented to the committee by President Obama. They had a different legal philosophy than my own, but I never doubted one moment that they were not qualified. I thought Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were qualified. The Senate in the past has looked at qualifications more than anything else. We've taken a different path at times. Bork, Thomas, Alito, Kavanaugh. I hope we don't take that path with Judge Barrett. She doesn't deserve that. I don't think it makes this hearing any better. And the American people, I believe, would not deserve a repeat of those episodes in the Senate Judiciary Committee's history. To my Democratic colleagues, I respect you all. We've done some things together, and we've had some fights in this committee. I've tried to give you the time you need to make your case, and you have every right in the world to make your case. I think I know how the vote's going to come out, but I think Judge Barrett is required for the good of the nation to submit to your questions and ours. This is going to be a long, contentious week. I would just ask one thing of the committee. To the extent possible, let's make it respectful. Let's make it challenging. Let's remember the world is watching. Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Debate of the 2020 election. For the first time since October 2016, President Trump will share the stage with a political opponent, Democratic presidential nominee and former Vice President Joe Biden. Here's a look at the stakes for tonight. About 3/4 of likely viewers, people who say they'll watch, are tuning in to see how their candidate does. Just 6% say they're watching because they're still deciding whom to vote for. 6% may not sound like a lot, but it can take less than that to flip a state. 13 states, plus Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, saw a margin smaller than 6% in the 2016 election. Together, they're worth 162 electoral votes, more than half the 270 needed to win the presidency. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nicole Killian join me now. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter. She is in Cleveland tonight. And Nicole is a CBS News correspondent covering all things out of Washington. Welcome to you both. All right, Caitlin, let me start with you. The number of persuadable voters may be relatively small, but how important are undecided voters at this moment in the campaign?
Right, that number of undecided voters is very small. We have fresh new polling out from CBS News that shows a vast majority of people that are going to be watching this debate tonight, likely voters. 73% say that they've already chosen a candidate and they're tuning in to see how that candidate does. About 41% are tuning in just for the entertainment value alone. About 8% are tuning in because they have nothing else to watch, so maybe they have exhausted all of the options on Netflix. And here's the key number, 6%. 6% of likely voters in our poll tonight say they are tuning in to figure out who they are going to vote for. So that's a very small margin, a very small number. We've been talking all day about, are there any of these persuadable voters left in an election that is increasingly becoming all about turning out your base? Who are these voters that are going to be tuning in tonight? Just 6% of them looking to see how Biden and Trump do against each other. We know, as we've been talking about also, that Democratic Party voters have been waiting for tonight this entire campaign, going all the way back to Iowa in 2019 when I was out there covering one of the first presidential events by Elizabeth Warren, who announced her candidacy. Voters even then were saying that the way that they were going to measure up these candidates running for the Democratic nomination was imagining them on a debate stage with Donald Trump. So tonight we'll see what their expectations are and if they paid off.
Yeah, I remember you telling us about that all those months ago. Well, Nicole, of course, one big difference about this election cycle is that voting is already underway. Close to 1.3 million people have already voted. In the battleground state of Wisconsin, they're already at a 10th of 2016 turnout. So how does that change the dynamic of the race and the debates?
Well, I think it does and it doesn't. I mean, that is a lot of people, but there's still a lot of people who haven't voted. And so whether someone is voting absentee, voting by mail, voting early in person, which we've seen that in a number of states, or just waiting until Election Day to cast their vote, voters make up their minds when they make up their minds. And while many have, there are still some out there that haven't. I've been traveling across a couple of states recently where I have encountered people who, few at least, who are still undecided. So to Caitlin's point, even if it is a relatively small number by our polling standards, certainly this presents an opportunity for voters to put these two candidates side by side and see how they match up against each other. And also, again, as Caitlin mentioned, certainly with the latest polling also showing that people just want to see how these candidates do. And I was struck by that number that some are just tuning in for the entertainment value of it all. But, the bottom line is certainly it will be a factor for some voters as far as their decision. To others, it may reinforce the decision they've already made.
Yeah. Well, we know that tonight's debate topics are broken up into 6 different segments as chosen by the moderator, each for about 15 minutes. Caitlin, in which topics do you see the candidates gaining an advantage?
Well, I think the focus on 2 topics that are top of mind for voters heading into this November election, the coronavirus pandemic and the economy. On the coronavirus pandemic, Joe Biden has shown in battleground states and nationally that he leads on that measure, that Americans by and large disapprove of the president's handling of coronavirus and are supporting Biden on that measure. But when it comes to the economy, that's been the silver lining for Donald Trump. He's been leading on the measure of the economy, trying to make that argument that the economy was good before the pandemic happened. So this is going to be an instance where you'll see the president on offense going after Joe Biden probably on the economy and raising questions about what Joe Biden would do and what he would have done differently on that measure. And then on coronavirus, this is where the Biden campaign really wants to focus tonight, making this race a referendum on the president's handling of the pandemic and also saying what he would have done differently if he were in charge. So those are 2 measures that are top of mind for voters and 2 issues that we'll see discussed at length in this debate.
Well, Nicole, we know the president and Joe Biden have each been preparing in different ways for this debate, and we've seen them both on the debate stage before, President Trump last in 2016, and Joe Biden as recently as March. How might they approach this debate?
Well, I think in one of 2 ways, or a combination of both. I think if they stick to the script, I think you will hear, for instance, the president make the argument of, I've been doing more in 47 months than Joe Biden has in 47 years. That's been the argument he's been making most recently on the campaign trail. And so I think you will hear that thread through any number of topics, whether it is the pandemic, the economy, race, law and order, even with his Supreme Court nominee. So that's one possibility. And of course, Biden, the mantra he's been sounding as of late has been the Scranton versus Park Avenue approach. And so with the story that broke a couple of days ago on the president's taxes, this allows him to hammer that message home as well, that he's the one looking out for the little guy, the average worker out there, while the president has, kind of lived the high life his whole life. And so I think, again, you will hear the former vice president make that argument across all the topics tonight. If they go off script, all bets are off. I mean, I think that's really certainly one thing I'll be watching for, but I think what a lot of people will be watching for, especially those who said they're looking for the entertainment value here, how will the gloves come off? Will these guys go after each other? If you have followed the president and watched his campaign rallies, he can go in on Joe Biden. Joe Biden equally can hit back. And we even heard the vice president just tonight at a debate watch party saying that the president is going to bring the fight to Joe Biden tonight. So to the extent that this does become a knockout, drag-out fight, that is certainly something that I think many will be watching for as well. So on script, off script, we'll just have to see, or a combination of both, like I said.
Right, something like that. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nicole Killian, great to have you both. Thank you. As we mentioned, the president has not been on a debate stage since 2016. Back then, Philippe Reines played the role of then Republican nominee Donald Trump for Hillary Clinton's debate prep. Here's some of what they had to prepare for.
A good job in the 1990s. I think a lot about what worked and how we can make it work again.
Well, he approved
3 million
NAFTA.
new jobs,
He approved
a balanced
NAFTA,
budget,
which is the single worst trade deal ever approved in this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Just join the debate by saying more crazy things. Now, let me say
there's nothing crazy about not letting our companies bring their money back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, let's start the clock again, Lester. Starting when I was a senator from New York. But that's not the point here.
Why didn't you do it? Why didn't you do it?
Because I was a senator with a Republican president.
Oh, really?
I will be the
you
president.
You could have done it. If you were an effective, senator, you could have done it. If you were an effective senator, you could have done it. But you were not an effective.
Please allow her to
senator.
respond. She didn't interrupt you.
That's part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security, payroll, contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund.
And former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and Senior Advisor to Hillary Clinton, Philippe Reines, joins me now. Philippe, welcome. So you said that the key to beating President Trump in a debate is to, quote, get out of his way. What did you mean by that?
First, I want to thank you for that just lovely walk down memory lane.
How'd you feel about that, Philippe?
Parts of it I want to laugh, parts of it I want to cry. I'll probably do it after we hang up. What I mean by that is, look, there is one Donald Trump. People argue which Donald Trump are we going to see. There's one. You see him, you cover the White House, you see what's happening every single day. We see it 3 to 5 times a week for the last 6 months. That guy is showing up tonight. There's no other guy. So that guy is not doing well. That guy, he's got his 40%, but the rest of America is not so keen on the bluster, on the bombast, on the line. Now, it makes good TV, and if Donald Trump's strategy is to really take advantage of the biggest audience he's going to have this campaign, then yeah, he can enjoy himself, and maybe even some people will say he won the debate, but he's losing the race. And if his goal were to come into this debate and try to do some good for himself, he would take a different approach. But as a human being, he's not capable of doing it. So everyone's focused on how is Joe Biden going to react? What is Joe Biden going to say? Is he going to fact check him? Is he going to keep his cool? Is he going to lose his cool? The truth of the matter is, if I were Joe Biden, and I would say, hi, Chris Wallace, the moderator, thank you for being here tonight. And thank you to Case University for hosting us. And with that, I yield my 45 minutes to Donald Trump. Because the guy never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And while 4 years ago it was hard to watch about those clips, was that you do see how within the interrupting and the histrionics, he's delivering message, whether it was job creation or trade, and he was getting in his knocks on her. Now he doesn't do that. Now when he opens his mouth, it's a list of grievances about how slippery ramps are and about how perfect his transcripts are and angry Democrats. And it's one thing if he stands in the Rose Garden and he has all the time in the world to go off for 50 minutes and throw in some stuff about Joe Biden. He's got 2 or 3 minutes at a shot tonight. If he wants to send, each of those men have to decide, do I want to spend 90 minutes quarreling with the other guy, or do I want to spend 90 minutes talking to the audience? It's clear what choice Trump is going to make. It's clear that Joe Biden knows the more he talks to the audience, the better he is. That doesn't mean he's going to stand there and take whatever comes at him. And by the way, if he just stood there and took it, a lot of people would say, including me, I don't want to see someone who can't defend themselves, who can't be strong in the face of being bullied. So Joe Biden has a hard job, but Donald Trump has a bigger task, and I'm pretty confident that he's going to blow it. And even the last thing I'll say is, in the 1% chance that he took this mythical debate drug himself and he were to give a good performance and say, everyone should wear masks and we're going to test more, it'll stop tomorrow. He'll undo anything he does. So that guy's going to show up and that guy's losing. And that guy is counting on Joe Biden to, I don't know, have some kind of health event that disqualifies himself. I mean, that's a pretty passive plan.
You know, Philippe, I want to ask you a question having to do with gender, because you raised this notion of Donald Trump interrupting Secretary Clinton during the debate. Let's go ahead and, at the risk of alienating you, Philippe, we're going to play for some of our viewers here who may have missed our montage off the top, just a little bit of what we saw in 2016. Let's listen.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
You know, Philippe, I'm not even sure what the question is. I think I start with this idea. Do you think there is a difference in the expectation of a male candidate versus a female candidate when it comes to engaging in these kinds of verbal confrontations in a place like a general election debate?
There's absolutely no doubt. I mean, no one tonight is going to look at Joe Biden and say, oh, he interrupted Donald Trump. How, testy of him or how touchy of him. Hillary Clinton was the first major party nominee. And without going down this path too much, we look at these debates and we look at moments like these and we try to envision a president. We only had 44 men who have been president. So it's hard, it's impossible to imagine a woman. Now, Hillary herself has written in her book, in that moment later on where he's stalking her, that I wanted to turn around and say, back off, creep. You know what? The idea that everyone would applaud and think that's so great, it would have been good TV. And in hindsight, I wish she had done it. But we'd also be talking about, does she have the temperament? Did she lose her cool? Did she, is she too words that I won't say on, family-friendly mediums? And Joe Biden doesn't have to worry about that.
Does that give Joe Biden an advantage? Sorry, Philippe, I don't mean to interrupt, but does that mean Joe Biden has an advantage that Hillary Clinton didn't?
It is. I mean, that one clip, he said she is such a nasty woman. We're all sitting here like, oh, yeah, I remember that moment. That's just another day in our life. You wouldn't have said that. He's not going to say, he might say to Chris Wallace, that's such a nasty question, or that is such a nasty person. And maybe he says to Joe Biden, you're so nasty, but it's different. When he said, you know what he won't say, which he said to Hillary, she doesn't have that presidential look. And I don't think he was talking about her tie or lack of. He was saying she's a woman, that she's shorter, she can't bench press as much. I mean, I don't even know what he's saying, but you know it when you hear it. And no, that's not something that Joe Biden has to deal with. And unfortunately, that's probably going to redound to his benefit. I mean, Hillary I love her to death, and I've worked for her and known her since 2002, but she has an incredibly annoying habit of being right about 4 or 5 years too early.
Well, let me ask you this. If you're Joe Biden, do you see these debates more as an opportunity or a potential liability, given what we've seen so far with respect to the trajectory of this contest?
No, I would be excited if first of all, as a human, these people get nervous too. And, he spent some time figuring out what kind of tie he should wear. But if I were Joe Biden, he knows he's ready. It might get ugly. He'll have good moments, he'll have bad moments, but he knows that this is the best opportunity to talk to audiences that might not ever see. I mean, this is just a lot of people. You're going to have people tonight that are tuning in to Fox to watch Tucker who are going to say, oh, I'm bumping into a debate. They're going to see them for 90 minutes and they're going to see them without a filter. Now, they might be yelling and talking over each other, but it's not until later at night that the likes of Sean Hannity gets their hands on these clips and starts to say other things. And that does not benefit Donald Trump. Donald Trump needs that filter. He needs the artificial, the guy, Britt Hume on Fox a little while ago said that he's convinced that Joe Biden is senile. You know what the problem is? Joe Biden's not senile, and we're all about to see that he's not senile. And yes, these are opportunities. And it's in very simple terms, the debate is a huge moment, but it's just another moment. His convention speech was a moment. His being yesterday at a rally is a moment. His giving a speech next week is a moment. The campaign is a totality of moments. And Joe Biden's have been consistent. What Joe Biden says tonight is what he's going to say tomorrow is what he said last month. Donald, and that seems to be working with enough people to put him in office, hopefully. Donald Trump, what he says tonight, some of it will be the same, but he's so proud of the fact that he's got new lines of attack on Joe Biden. I'm sorry, if it's 35 days left and you're still trying to figure out what to say, then you aren't just blowing a big moment. You've been blowing every moment until now.
All right. Well, we are just minutes away. Philippe Reines. Philippe, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
Still to come, we'll talk President Trump's strategy for tonight with RNC Senior Advisor for Data, Katie Walsh-Shields. Stay with us. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health. And I think probably he's not all that enthusiastic about having the rest of our country see what the real reasons are.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
COVID has taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans. Rural areas like this here on Navajo Nation are especially hit hard.
15 to 30% of our Navajo citizens don't have running water.
In any indigenous reservation, there is a shortage of physicians.
Native Americans are amongst the most vulnerable and hardest hit by COVID.
Yeah, the more we lose our elders to COVID-19, the more we lose our language and our way of life.
We need to bring awareness to the attention of Washington, D.C. and United States citizens that there is a need to focus on the first citizens of this country.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
Off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming, but most of them are just kind of abandoned.
The restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in America. And yet it continues to be the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States.
Barely anybody's making enough to live.
You're donating plasma to get by.
It's literally a slave wage.
I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks. It's pretty sad.
Even really young kids are feeling what's going on right now. How should parents be talking to them about this whole question of racial justice?
How do we embrace this moment and turn it into real change?
What we really must focus on is moving from protesting to policy.
Join Gail, Anthony, and Tony on CBS This Morning.
CBSN Los Angeles. Get local news, breaking news, anytime, anywhere.
It's easy to find us, and it's free.
Download the CBS News app on your favorite devices. CBSN Los Angeles, streaming 24/7.
You can watch CBSN 24/7.
I've got an amazing story to share with you.
I understand you have some breaking news.
How does it all play out?
It's quite an adventure here at CBSN.
It's been a day.
We're just minutes away from the start of the first debate between President Trump and Joe Biden. Mr. Trump is the first incumbent in 28 years to enter the first debate, trailing in national polls. Katie Walsh-Shields joins me now. She is a senior advisor for data at the Republican National Committee and former chief of staff at the RNC. Welcome to you, Katie. Thanks for joining us. So both President Trump and Joe Biden are trying to win over this small sliver of undecided voters. What role does a debate play in attracting those voters?
Well, thanks for having me. I think the debate plays an important role in that it'll be the first time that voters will see the president and former Vice President Biden on the same stage as a contrast. And I think that's a big deal. We really haven't seen former Vice President Biden campaign very much. We haven't seen him on the trail. When we have, he's had a certain level of gaffes. And so I think this will be the first time that the voters can see them side by side. I think that that'll be a big opportunity for, as you mentioned, a small sliver of voters, but still, I think it'll make a difference.
All right, when I let our audience know, on the left of our screen there, we are looking at live pictures, or we were, of Case Western Reserve University, of course, where that debate is set to get underway minutes from now. So we know the basic topics for tonight. Katie, which ones do you think the president could use to his advantage the most out of the list?
Well, I think the economy is clearly the president's strong suit. I think he'll talk a lot about the 10.6 million new jobs he's created in the last 4 months since we've kind of reopened post-shutdown with coronavirus. And I think that'll be something he'll come back to over and over again. There are just so many things that are tied to getting people back to work, including opening schools, getting kids back in school. A lot of people get their health care from their work, from their jobs. And so you'll see the president come back over and over again, I believe, to how important it is to keep the economy open, how vital it is to make sure that we're getting people back to work, and contrasting that with Joe Biden, who has directly said he would be for another shutdown if we had an outbreak.
Yeah, I do want to ask you more about the pandemic because the president has made a number of contradictory statements about the coronavirus pandemic. We know from polling that many people are skeptical about a vaccine. The president insists that one will be ready within weeks. Medical experts, though, who work for him say that's not true. And I wonder what you think the president's approach should be in talking about this, given the fact that we know there are Americans who look at this notion of when a vaccine comes out, they feel as though they won't necessarily be in line first to get it because there has been a lot of political kind of conversation surrounding the push for this vaccine.
I think the Democrats have actually made an even bigger political statement on this. You've seen Senator Harris come out and say she actually wouldn't take the vaccine, even if it came out. And I think that confuses the American public, and we'll continue to have this conversation between the president, who I think has been incredibly helpful in terms of his Operation Warp Speed and taking regulation out of the drug approval process to try and get a drug to market faster. I think once we have a vaccine, it'll come in record time. And I think you will see the Democrats, Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, constantly skeptical of it. And I think the American public will see through that because the American public says, look, a vaccine should not be political. We need to protect our seniors. We need to get people back to work. We need to protect our vulnerable individuals as it relates to the COVID virus. And so I think they will kind of see through that ploy, but I think the president should be commended for his work on Operation Warp Speed.
All right. We just saw moments ago the various family members from both candidates entering the debate hall. There you see the moderator, Fox News' Chris Wallace, addressing the audience now. But certainly in a sign of these COVID-19 times, you saw those family members were all wearing masks and their chairs appeared to be socially distant. I do also want to ask you, Katie, about health care. When are we going to see specifics on the president's health care plan? And what are your thoughts about it getting past a Democratic-controlled Congress?
I don't think we've seen many things get through in the last 4 years, or excuse me, the last 2 years with the Democrat-controlled House. So I'm not terribly optimistic that anything would get passed with the Democrat-controlled House. But I do think you'll see the president continue to talk about covering pre-existing conditions, about lowering prescription drug prices. He's been really tough on the pharmaceutical companies, which is not historically a position that Republicans have taken. And so I think it is really something that he will continue to talk to seniors about. It's a main issue to seniors over and over again when you look at polling is prescription drug prices. And so I think you'll see the president continue to talk about the elements of a healthcare plan that he thinks are important, but I don't think there's much chance that anything gets through the Democrat-controlled House.
So we shouldn't expect a sort of comprehensive plan, more piecemeal kind of elements, as you say, of what he would like to see in healthcare. Well,
I'm sure the White House may put out a policy paper that kind of outlines what he would like to see in a bill. But I think, the president will, understand that getting something through a Democrat-controlled House is very unlikely. And so he'll continue to put his benchmarks out and say, these are the things that I would want in a healthcare bill. If we're going to talk about what is important with healthcare to the American public, this is what I want to see. And I think he'll maybe put out position papers. I think you'll see the president communicate that directly, as he often does with American people, but I don't think you'll see any movement on it. And so I think you'll continue to see Democrats and Republicans kind of going back and forth on what they think is important, but I don't know that we'll see an actual bill to speak of.
All right, Katie Walsh-Shields. Katie, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And the first debate between President Trump and Joe Biden is about to get started. Let's go to our CBS News Primetime Special.
We'll win and we'll do it together.
Former Vice President Joe Biden.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
President Donald Trump.
Maybe he's going to be great at the debate. He's been doing it for 47 years.
The first presidential debate.
Have you begun to prepare for debates against President Trump?
I can hardly wait.
Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell with Gail King and John Dickerson in the nation's capital, and we are just moments away from the first presidential debate between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. After months of lobbying long-distance attacks, aides for both candidates say tonight the gloves and the masks will come off. The two men arrived at the debate hall at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland a short time ago. They are not expected to shake hands because of the coronavirus pandemic.
And let's not forget, as we come on the air tonight, this virus has killed more than 205,000 Americans. This pandemic has led the U.S. into its worst economic contraction since the Great Depression. More than 26 million Americans are claiming unemployment benefits, and two late developments have thrown a lit match into an already volatile race. The Republicans' effort to quickly replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg with conservative Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and the latest revelations about President Trump's taxes.
So the stage is set for this first showdown. There will be no opening statements. Chris Wallace of Fox News will be asking the questions. He was chosen by the Presidential Debate Commission, and he's identified 6 main topics: the Trump and Biden records, the Supreme Court, COVID-19, the economy, race and violence in cities, and the integrity of the election.
It is going to be quite a night ahead. Let's bring in CBS's Ben Tracy at the White House. And Ben, what are you hearing from the Trump campaign?
Well, Nora, we're hearing that President Trump is ready to joust and that he feels that Joe Biden's family and his cognitive abilities are fair game in this debate. Now, the president is expecting the first question out of the gate will be about his taxes, these revelations that he basically did not pay any federal income tax for years. We're also told by the campaign, as they're trying to play down the president's preparation for this debate, that he actually has been practicing, and they say he's ready for any question that may come his way.
Ben Tracy, let's turn now to CBS's Ed O'Keefe. He is in the debate hall where the anticipation is building. Ed?
Nora, good evening. Once they get rocking and rolling here in Cleveland tonight, expect Biden to focus on two key things: the president's taxes and his handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the economic downturn. His aides believe if he keeps focused on those two issues, he can maintain his lead in battleground states. One thing we shouldn't expect Biden to do tonight is serve as a real-time fact checker. He'd suggested earlier this month that's what he wanted to do. His aides now say he'll instead try speaking directly to the American people. Here in the room tonight, we count about 107 invited guests. That's down from the usual 900 who observe these debates in person. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And John, does Trump know that he has to change the trajectory of this race as it stands now?
Absolutely. You can hear Ben Tracy say it, which is he's going to be going at all over the place because he wants to shake things up. That's always been his way.
The debate is about to begin. Here now, the moderator, Chris Wallace.
Good evening from the Health Education campus of Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic. I'm Chris Wallace of Fox News, and I welcome you to the first of the 2020 presidential debates between President Donald J. Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments, with 2-minute answers from each candidate to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of each segment. Both campaigns have agreed to these rules. For the record, I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. I can assure you, none of the questions has been shared with the commission or the two candidates. This debate is being conducted under health and safety protocols designed by the Cleveland Clinic, which is serving as the health security advisor to the commission for all 4 debates. As a precaution, both campaigns have agreed the candidates will not shake hands at the beginning of tonight's debate. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, no boos or other interruptions, so we, and more importantly you, can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now, as we welcome the Republican nominee, President Trump, and the Democratic nominee, Vice President Biden.
How you doing, man? How are you? I'm well.
Gentlemen, a lot of people have been waiting for this night, so let's get going. Our first subject is the Supreme Court. President Trump, you nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend to succeed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You say the Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight: why are you right in the argument you